ArtSpark Texas, sparking the creative in everyone. ArtSpark Texas Veterans presents Voices in Verse Writers Conference in partnership with the Rio Grande Valley International Poetry Festival. Sponsored by El Zarape Press, Texas Commission on the Arts, and the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. Our first presentation is by Nathan Brown, 2013-2014 Poet Laureate of Oklahoma. Nathan is presenting Write It Out, Lists. He is introduced by Daniel Garcia Ordaz.
So welcome again, everybody, and thanks again to ArtSpark for having us. And we know that it's a nonprofit organization that does some great work. I know that initially we reached out to veterans, sort of historically with a workshop like this, and their families and so on. And so, but we tweaked it and we wanted to just invite everyone out there, interested in writing. And so our first presenter is a singer-songwriter and author, the Poet Laureate of Oklahoma from 2013 to 2014, lives now in the great state of Texas. He holds a PhD in English and journalism from the University of Oklahoma, where he's taught for over 20 years. He travels full-time performing readings, concerts, workshops, of course, in the non-COVID world, right? And he's doing some really cool fireside, series where he goes live and presents some of his work. So definitely find him on social media, Nathan Brown, and he has our web on the website that I'll share here in a moment. Is the rest of his bio, as well as a link to his website. So now officially 100% at 9:16. Let's welcome everyone, Nathan Brown.
Hey, how's it going? Oh man, so I am so grateful to be here. Everyone, Daniel, April, all the work that you've done to make this happen. Thank you so much. And it's absolutely wonderful to be here. And what really makes this extra fun for me today in particular is that I get to basically talk about my single favorite thing in life. It is not necessarily being a poet. It's not necessarily being an author or a singer-songwriter or whatever it is, but it is about much more basically the reason what created that in my life. And I tell people that the books I've published, I think I have oh, by the way, I don't know if it's 22 or 23, just arrived like UPS front door last night, my most recent book. And it doesn't matter, all you writers out there, it does not matter. It doesn't matter if it's your first book, your third or your fifth, or it doesn't matter. Every time it comes, it's like you pet it and you make a margarita and it's, oh man. And so the thing about it is that for me, to be honest though, out of all the things I do, my very favorite thing is very simply a daily writing practice. And so this is the quick explanation for what brings me here. And it is that to be very clear about it, on the occasion of becoming a single father, which was a tough time for me. I began journaling, initially it was a little bit about my daughter, but, and being a single dad and things like that. But began journaling, writing, I began writing a poem every day. Now, this was well over 20 years ago. And to this day, I am still, I still write a poem every day. And I have done that for, I think it's 23, 24 years now. I'm not sure, somewhere in there. What that does, first of all, is results in a lot of really bad poetry that you can't use. So let's be clear about that. The main thing that I learned from a daily writing, there are several things I learned from a daily writing practice. One was allow yourself to suck. That was actually very hard for me to do. I put a lot of demands on myself, you know, that every time I hit the page, it had to be deep and wonderful and fantastic. And I really did. I learned to let that go. You know, some days it strikes and some days it doesn't. But the act of doing it, you know, I've tried to figure out the best. I grew up a Baptist preacher's kid. I'm surviving. I've gotten a lot of counseling and it's okay. But what I do mean is there's a lot of that language that has made me nervous for so many years. And, you know, but in trying to come up with a description of what my morning practice is for me, I finally at some point fell back on it's church. It is my daily, it's how I reconnect with whatever it is. And so what happened though is in the early stages of this, initially it was wonderful and it was exciting, fun. I couldn't wait to meet it, you know. And then I'm going to tell you about 2 years into writing a poem every day, the well dries up. It's like, well, you go to the page and you're like, I don't, you know, look, I've written, you know, I don't have anything else. I'm out of material. And so what I'm going to be telling you about today was how I climbed out of that hole and ended up in this place of never not having something to write about. In other words, I came up with this system that allowed me no excuses because there is something I can write about today, and I happen to have it, you know, right here. And so that's basically what this is out. And so, like I said, my books, a lot of the things that I've done, publishing wise or anything else, are all basically a byproduct of a daily practice. I had no intention to be a poet. I had no intention to be an author. I did have an intention to be a songwriter since I was 8 years old, and my older brother handed me an LP of John Denver's Rocky Mountain High. And at 8 years old, I never recovered from that. And it was then my life's goal to be John Denver. I didn't want to be like John Denver. I wanted to be John Denver. And so I went to work and I learned every one of those damn songs. And to this day, it's the John Denver is my longest playlist on iTunes. I have more songs. I left him for about 20 years. And then about 10 years ago, I came back to him and just realized, you know, that was the reason. That was where all this started. For me, I started journaling as a mopey teenager when I was 13, and you know, and so that's you know, that's how it all began for me. So what I'm going to present to you today is it's the heartbeat, it's the foundation of what has become my favorite thing in life, and that is my daily morning writing session. That's all my friends are trained now. They know to never call me before 11 o'clock because I will not answer. And phones go offline. It's all boom, done. This is what I do in the morning hours. So this is how I got it. I got over the hump years of wondering, well, what in the world am I going to write about? And what it was is that I created a list of lists. And the thing about these lists is that they are pretty much ongoing. You don't necessarily reach the limit on any of these lists, and so it is a set them up, knock them down kind of thing. All right. So I'm going to share the screen just momentarily to kind of set this up, and just do want to ask the question real quickly. Can everybody see that? So that I just need a little confirmation to know. Okay.
Yes.
So
Yes.
This is what I call listing, side to side, top to bottom. There's the margarita reference, the side to side listing. But how to never be caught without something to write about. And so here's what I want to do. What I'm hoping is that you'll join in this physically, actively, and do this. So what would be great, probably the simplest thing is paper and a pen, since you're looking at your laptop, unless you have a secondary computer next to you that you can do this, or however you want to do this. But I actually do want to create probably, some of my lists now have upwards of 50 to 100 items on them. What I want to do as we go is I want to shoot for, quickly do about 3 to 5, like the first that come to mind, that kind of thing. But I would love it if you would just join in with me in doing this. And handwriting seems like the simplest way. So coffee in one hand, pen in the other. And here we go. So the first list now, and by the way, the list that I'm going to give you today is only suggestive. What I have mostly discovered is that other people, after I do this, other people begin creating their own other lists that work for their life that they begin keeping. And I have been given many awesome suggestions and ideas for other lists. So the list of lists is actually longer than this, but let's do it together. So the first one, if I can figure out how to, okay. Here we go. So the first one is, I ask people to create a list of letters that need to be or never got written. And whether the recipient is alive or no longer with us, it doesn't matter. If that letter needs or needed to be written, it does not necessarily mean that you will send the letter. It's just, does that letter need to be written? Now, and there's one other item on this list, and that is whether you knew them or not. So I had a student one time who came to me had taken that particular one on, and she had created a list of people that she wanted to write letters to, and this list basically constituted of Jesus and Gandhi and Martin Luther King, which made me a little nervous at first. I was like, letters to Gandhi, and how's this going to work out? Well, it turns out what the work that she began bringing to class was rather extraordinary. She eventually converted the letters into poems, and this actually became a chapter in a book that she ended up getting published after school. After she graduated. And I want to just listen to the opening line of her poem to Hitler. Okay. This was her opening line. Who hurt you? And I have to say that the entire chapter, by the way, when the book came out and it was all edited and everything else, I have to tell you, it was amazing what came from this one very simple idea. It turned into a full chapter for this girl. But I've had a lot of people tell me that this is a meaningful list. So quick, 3 to 5 names. Write down quickly just ideas that you might have for 3 to 5 letters. Who would that be to? I had somebody, by the way, do letters to time periods. Times in history that they wished they had lived in. And so just a second for that. I've been trying to track down the theme song to Jeopardy, so I could play it during these like da, 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 da. Which would actually get incredibly obnoxious about the third or fourth time. So. And by the way, feel free, these things are going to pop into your mind as we go along today. So, keep it all with you. And when you think of someone to write a letter to about 15 minutes from now, jot it down real quick, that kind of thing. But let me go on to the next one. The next list. Okay. This is a list that is greatly dependent upon people's personalities. But whatever your personality, this is how you get it out of your system. This is letters to the editor. So the topics and the issues that matter most to you. This, by the way, this is why this one can be an ever-growing never-ending list. But I maintain that well-written, now the key word here is well-written. This is what we're missing in a tweeting society and a Facebooking society, all right? What we have is astoundingly poorly written rants that are senseless and useless to society, and they accomplish absolutely nothing except to maybe encourage the choir. But what I maintain is that a well thought out, well written rant is still an important thing to culture and society and saving the world, but it's well written is the key. I'm going to give you, by the way, one example of something that you can look up. If you have never read the letter that the poet Sharon Olds wrote to Laura Bush after being invited to read at the White House during National Poetry Month. It is a one-page, by the way, you can Google it. It was published in The Nation, the magazine, The Nation. You can Google Sharon Olds' letter to the White House, just about anything, and it will come up. It is a one-page masterwork of a gracious denial that still makes very clear why. And it is an amazing work. And by the way, another well-written rant is Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal, his essay, A Modest Proposal, because it uses humor. It uses humor to throw in our faces, and it's an astoundingly terrible situation. And that was a pretty crazy. I think today's society, that one makes us extremely uncomfortable. But to the time period that he was living in, it was a scathing report on the government of the time, and he did it in a just horrifically humorous way. Okay, so this, if maybe you've been writing this one as I've been talking, because I went on a little too long, I don't know. Let's take just a minute real quickly though. What would be some of those topics? Make a list of 3 to 5 topics and issues, the things that are hot on your mind, maybe ones that have been for a long time, maybe some of them are brand new. You know, for me, I tend to shy away from terms like global warming and climate change. And for me, it is the topic of my absolute love and adoration for the earth, and how just caring for it and wanting to keep it just seems like a no-brainer. It doesn't matter what your political stance is or your science foundation or whatever. What on earth could be wrong with just loving the earth and what we have left of it, and wanting it, to be a great place for our grandchildren too, So that's one that I've written so much about that it's, that I wear it out. Okay, so 3 to 5 on that one. And the next list, I need to be careful and watch the time here. Okay, so this is a fun one. It can also, however, at the same time, be a really tough one. And this is making a list of the great family stories. Those individual stories that define your life and your family's history. The ones that always get told over and over at Thanksgiving, and they usually with slight improvements and embellishments every year. The story gets a little bit better every year, and until it kind of basically hits that realm of fiction. But they're still important. By the way, I always tell, like, for me personally, I have people who disagree with me, but I've always believed that that truth is entirely more important than facts. That truth accomplishes more in the end than facts do. And the actual cold hard facts of a story usually will often constitute for the worst version of it. Facts are frequently boring. And that's why the great storytellers do embellish and things like that. Now, if you're writing a memoir, you have a separate set of rules that you are bound by, and that gets a little more complicated, not the least of which are legal issues, which I have learned the hard way. I was one of those lucky authors who had the privilege of being sued for my first book. So that was a great, you know, in your first, that's a learning experience that you never recover from. And so to all my college students, you know, one of the first things I always tell my college students is there is absolutely no reason whatsoever to use the person's actual name. Never. Unless that person wants to put it in print and in a contract that they're okay with being remembered, for better or worse. So this is a tricky territory, the great family stories. And you'll notice the very cold and frightening one, that point on the list that I put at the end. The ones that never get told. And this is the more dangerous territory. I had a professor one time recommend, he said, you know, okay, so write about the thing that scares you most. It's a very common, you know, piece of advice from the professorial crowd, but write about the thing that scares you most, the thing that you are most worried about. And what I have learned in my writing career over time is I have learned how to write myself into a good deal of trouble, but stay out of legal trouble. And that is that's a tricky territory, and I learn more about it, you know, every year. But I love to write myself. I love to get myself into trouble. You know, I have people, by the way, who tell me, you know, the Southern Literary Review, in a book review not too long ago, let me know very, very clearly why they did not like me as a poet and why they hated my book and thought that I was terrible and accessible and all these other things. That's great. That's fine with me. I don't care because I have enough people who do like it. And so let's get on down the road, you know. But that's a tough one. And in my family, that is I will say, as some of the older generation of my family, you know, begins to die off, don't mean this in a bad way, but that part of the list begins to change, I have noticed, the older I get. And that telling the stories that never got told, you know, now that Grandma Brown is gone, for instance, what I can and can't say changes. And so that's an ever-changing horizon on that one. Okay, so I'm sure that maybe you've been jotting those maybe as we went, and I'm going to go on to the next list here. This one it has always been a very fun one for me, and every time I travel, it grows. The list continues, but this can also be a very historical one. So, what are the important places in your life? I tell people that I am a highly geographically sensitive. I am a geographically sensitive person. Places and spaces, terrains, geographies speak to me, mostly in a positive way, sometimes in a very dark and negative way. I've been in territories, geographies, and places that made me very uncomfortable. I've driven into towns before that I cannot tell you why, but there was a darkness and I was not comfortable. It made me nervous to stop and buy gas. And I can't explain it. I really can't. And, you know, you can ooh all you want, but I'm telling you, I have a weird sensitivity to it. And I don't know, Daniel, by the way, you mentioned the Fire Pit Sessions, the online Facebook video series that I've been to. And by the way, Take 100 is coming up. I've done 100 of these videos, but most of them occur out at my fire pit, which is this area on an extra lot that I have, where I have built out of stone stacking. The Irish and the Japanese have a tradition of it as well. There's no mortar. The stones have to sit on top of each other and lock into place. And limestone happens to be very, very good at this in particular, but it's turned into this, I don't know how to explain it, but but it's a very sacred place, and it sings to me, and it speaks to me. And every time I can't feel bad when I go out there. It's hard, and it's just become an extraordinary thing to me. So that is a place that only as of the last 2 to 3 years would be on this list now. It would be the fire pit. My hometown, I was born in Longview, Texas, but I consider my hometown to be Norman, Oklahoma. So for those of you who are familiar with the dynamic of Texas and Oklahoma, you know how extraordinarily problematic that is. Speaking of riding your way into trouble, I can make Texans and Oklahomans mad all at the same time because they hate each other so much. The thing I love about the Valley, Daniel, is that down in the valley, they're like, Oklahoma, what? Where is that? It's like, it's above Kansas. Oh, okay.
And then we have to Google Kansas.
So that's what I love. And strangely enough, also Dallas. Nobody in Dallas cares. It's only in Austin and San Antonio where they throw things at your car if you have an Oklahoma tag, or, and Houston's just too busy to care. And everybody driving in Houston, everybody's just trying to stay alive, so it doesn't matter. They're not looking at your license plate, they're looking at your eyes, trying to figure out if you have a gun or not. And so that my parents' hometowns are something that I realized became very important to my writing practice as an author. I needed to understand where my parents came from. And those are towns that I have actually put a considerable amount of time even going to and attending and learning more about, because I feel like my family history, I've realized now that those towns where my family, and I've even extended it to grandparents now, say a lot about me, and they inform my life in an incredible way. Annual vacation spots are very important. Where you spent your summers. For some people, that's a positive. For others, it's a negative. For my dad, it was a negative, and it had to do with cotton picking by hand, which was a very severe operation, a lot of bloody fingers. And where he or her asked you to marry him or her, that's a great spot. And the other thing, though, I had a student one time, this was something I added to the list, who made a list of places that she'd always wanted to go and hadn't been yet. And she chose to research and write about those places. And I thought that was kind of fun. Because I think that those places say a lot about us as well. I really do. I don't know why I want to go to Tonga and the Galapagos Islands, but I do. Easter Island, I don't know why, but I do want to go there. And I've always wanted to go to Australia, but I just don't know if I can survive the plane ride because I have claustrophobic issues, and 24 hours on a plane might actually kill me. I don't know. So we'll have to see after the pandemic is over. So here's the next list. Important events and dates. This is one of the ones that if you put a little thought into it, you realize could actually just simply grow out of control. And this is the reason why I tell people, ultimately, I do believe that the computer is the best place to begin to organize this list of lists. So I have a folder on my desktop that says the lists. And when I click on that folder, there is a list of folders. And those folders are the lists. And then when I click on those folders, I have all the documents and all the things and stuff that are related to that list. And so the computer is ultimately the easiest place to track all of this. But this is one where the events and dates that remapped your world, changed the way you looked at life, or influenced the way you perceive time. What I discovered about making this list is that for every item I added to the list, that item reminded me of another. When I would go back and remember a time, okay, and I kind of got back into that time, which, by the way, as an author, I go all the way in on many aspects of writing. One is that I have now created playlists on iTunes for every decade. So I have the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, I have a playlist for every decade. And when I am writing within a decade, I go back and I listen to the music from that decade, because it's incredible how the music informs a time period. So where I don't have a relative that's over the age of 60 who does not remember where they were when JFK was assassinated. They can tell you to the room of the town or whatever. They know exactly where it was. When the Beatles landed, I landed with the Beatles, it turns out. I landed in the US with the Beatles the same year. And so, you know, and to later generations, it would be on 9/11. We have a very clear, I know, I remember I was doing my morning writing session in a coffee shop in a Borders bookstore when a worker in the coffee shop part of the Borders bookstore wheeled out like an old box television on a tray stand out into the coffee shop. And all of us who were sitting there in the coffee shop at the Borders bookstore gathered around the television to watch the smoking towers. I'll never forget that scene. I'll never forget that moment. So this is one where one leads to another, and it's ever expanding. And when you start remembering a time period, all kinds of other memories. I remember people that I might have forgotten by remembering some other person. And so this one is a bottomless pit for me. Okay. The next list, I have found this also to just be extraordinary in and of itself. The five senses. As writers, sometimes we get a little sight and sound heavy. And we forget that science explains for us that taste and smell are actually the two most powerful of the senses to actually cause us to recall a forgotten memory. Smell and taste will build us back. So I very quickly, I don't know who would want to chime in here, but could you name the person and the thing that they bake or cook that is one of the most powerful memories that you have? Anybody, just chime in, a few of you real quick. Do we have to do that on chat or can it be sound?
People should be able to unmute themselves.
I would really love to hear this one.
Leaf says his uncle Buñuelos.
Buñuelos.
Right?
Okay.
For Christmas.
Yeah, holidays are a particular time for this as well. But I would let a few others, and I'm trying to look at the chat.
Grandmother's gumbo.
Grandmother's gumbo. Okay.
Oh, I see what they, okay.
Those are two great words together, grandmother and gumbo.
Hey, Nathan, it's me, Edward. How are you?
Yeah.
Here, let me look, see if you can see me. Hey, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good to see you. For me, sometimes the smell of burning wood takes me back to when my mother used to send me to Central America as a teenager in the summers to spend time there, you know, when we were out of school. And just the smell of the burning wood sometimes takes me back to the smell of the earth over there. And it just conjures up a lot of things, you know. I start remembering walking into the pharmacy, and then And then I remember the smell of the pharmacy, and then walking into a bakery there, it just brings back a lot of things. And it could be just the simple smell of burning wood that takes me back to, a time when I was, a teenager.
Uh, and I love how one smell led to another.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And by the way, Edward, I have to say that for me, I love that image. And the reason being that the older I get, my nose begins to distinguish. And I realize that I have different memories around burning oak, the smell of burning oak, than I do the smell of burning cedar, but especially the smell of burning pinon. And pinon is one of the most distinctive that there is. And I mean, I flash back in time to New Mexico. Many, many memories when I smell pinon burning. Yeah. And so I love where, yeah.
Yeah.
So you see very quickly how it didn't even have to be food oriented, but that power of smell.
Right.
The smell of that first warm to hot rain in the early summer when it hits pavement. There is no other smell at no other time of year like that. And I don't know why, but there is really something. I had that one launch me back to church camp one time, which was a massive mixture of good and very bad memories.
There's a few more in the chat. Susan says, my cousin's grandmother's chocolate gravy, which I don't know.
Wow.
That sounds delicious.
Wow. Cousin's grandmother's chocolate gravy. That's fantastic. I don't know if I've ever had one that long before. That's awesome.
Naomi says, my mother's perfume. Every time I smell it on someone else, it automatically takes me to my mom, home, and comfort.
By the way, I have a first girlfriend's cheap perfume memory that absolutely slays me every time. I mean, if I walk by it, I think I scare people, If I walk by, I'm like, oh my God. There she is. It's like, wow. And that was a particularly good memory, though, which I'm glad to report. But anyway, oh my gosh, that one kills me. Okay, so I see how this one just kind of popcorns out. It just pops.
We got one sound one, walnuts falling from the trees each autumn. So there's a sound one.
Yes, walnuts. By the way, here, I know the first time that acorn hits our metal roof, September, October, sometime or whatever, that sound, boom. It's like, yes, August is over. Thank you, dear. I grew up Baptist and I crossed myself. So I'm a very confused person when it comes to religion.
Some of these things also bring back fear or some sort of a PTSD. For example, for me, the sound of anything that pops makes me, for a slight second, gives me a little bit of a, nervous feel, because, I grew up where there was a lot of drive-by shootings and stuff. And not until I was older did I understand my fear for balloons and stuff like that, were because there are things that pop. They make a popping sound. So you won't find me putting air in a ball or in a tire because of that fear that it'll pop. And it's very nerve-wracking. So there are sounds that, they will bring back memories, of things that you want to forget.
Yes. I had a couple of uncles that returned from war to a small town in Oklahoma after war. And a construction crew took off on a jackhammer on a sidewalk, and my two uncles hit the ground face down in the middle of a small town in Oklahoma when a jackhammer went off. And so that's obviously a story that got passed down. They were walking with friends, the jackhammer goes off there, and within a second, they're face down on the ground. And everybody they were walking with is standing up wondering, what the hell happened. And oh my goodness, very powerful. For me, all my life, I loved the sound of rain. And since the Wimberley flood, here, and that happened a while back, where about 15 people just in this tiny town died from a swelling river, and also from the fact that our house is now flooded twice. I have very conflicting feelings about the sound of falling rain, and that's heartbreaking for me because I always loved that sound growing up. You know, thank you, Edward. That's very important to remember. Yeah. So I love where that one takes us. I really do. And so I'm sure that on that one, you'll have no problem, filling that one out. First kisses, for some people, that's a bad memory. And so all those are great. So there it is. However, this list led to another, and I'm trying to, let me get it back. Here we go. And that I realized was going to have to be a separate list for me. Because if we think about it, trying to figure out what in the world we're going to eat around the campfire at night was probably the beginning of storytelling in human history. This is where stories actually started, was the meal. And because it took time for food, it takes time for food to cook, it takes time for, the kind of thing. And so after the days, whatever, we came around the fire at night and poetry was born. And so to me, this list entails one of the oldest human activities that there is. By the way, I crack jokes about, how much I love the nectar of the gods. And it is specifically tequila. My apologies to all the other liquors in the world. That's, it's fine. You can be what you want to be, but nothing, the gods, it's tequila. And so, but fermentation, they now consider to be one of the top 3 human inventions in all of human history. It was the discovery of fermentation. And so, drink has been a part of survival, not just water. It's all kinds of things. Doctors who performed surgeries with whiskey on the wound, or, it's the stories are endless. But I realized that this list for me was going to have to become a separate thing from smell and taste. And this is a huge one for me. And so you can make this as a list within the list of the 5 senses if you want, but I'm going to move on for now, because this is one that I feel like there are some writers, anyone out there who is a reader. And by the way, if you are a writer and not a reader, good luck with that. Hope it works out for you. But lovers of movies, lovers of good books, all these things. This is a list that any good writer could probably base a book on, if not a career on. But this is the books, the movies, and the music, the art, the artwork, whatever it is that had a profound effect on your life. These, I love Googling a year and finding out what TV shows, movies, books, blah, whatever came out that year. I've always loved the fact that I was born with the Charlie Brown Christmas special. We came out the same year. And that's always meant a lot to me, and I have no idea why. But on this screen, what you will notice is the top 5 songs in the year that I was born. So that gives you which is another thing. So even though I might not say that this was my music, okay, this was the music that was playing when I came in. And I find that to be very interesting as well, since much later in life, I played keyboards in a band called Harvey and the Wallbangers, that was quite the sought after party band that specialized in 50s and 60s classic rock. And so I performed Wooly Bully, You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin' and Can't Go Get No Satisfaction in a band 25 years later in my life. And I love the way, again, we see how it all ties in. How many of you could just like in a single, just call the title, the book or one of the books that done it to you? Who could just like blurt it out, like the book that did it?
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Mm.
Mhm.
Anybody?
The book
Scarlet
of
Letter.
Three.
Scarlet
Oh.
Letter.
Ah,
I have a story, The Lottery.
ooh, yeah, yeah. That's I love it. Those are, by the way, for me, it wasn't the first, but I have to say that continually one of the I reread it regularly. Is the very first Winnie the Pooh book. I think it's absolutely astounding. And I had a good friend who was one of the most beloved professors at the University of Oklahoma, taught philosophy for 50 years, said that he could teach a semester-long philosophy 101 course using the initial Winnie the Pooh book as the textbook for the course. And I've always loved that. So this is a list that can or should be huge, especially for people who want to be artists or writers. This is the stuff that made us. And for me, I will tell you, walking out of a movie theater at 14 years of age, out of the movie theater from seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark, I was screwed up for the rest of my life. And I knew that I would never work behind a desk. No, it was bullwhips. And for me, that movie messed me up. And I think of the way that Star Wars defines an entire generation. And, all the different Star Treks and how the different Star Trek series walked different generations through time periods and things like that. And of course, there were much more, literary endeavors as well that were out there in the world. But those things, they define us. Okay, so that's a list that can take a lot of time. This is one that I've enjoyed going over with my parents. I'm very fortunate to be old and still have my parents in unusually good health. They are getting frail at 88, but I mean, I can have totally lucid conversations with both my parents. I love it when we do. And by the way, I have now presented these lists to my parents. And I am asking my parents to, one at a time, begin to fill in these lists. And that is becoming an extraordinary journey. But my mom and dad love this one. The good things that we have lost. I have a niece who believes that she discovered actual letter writing. And I was like, oh, honey. It's like, come on. Family dinners are a lost art. And I will just quickly say on this one that for me, I will say that one of the, what has become for me, one of the most important endeavors in my life now is I am seeking a return to silence. I am seeking out quiet and silence everywhere that I can find it. And it is amazing how difficult it is to find. And I do believe that a part of the destruction of the collective human psyche that we are witnessing in the news, from brains gone so bad that they would storm a Capitol and destroy it, in the name of a single person or whatever, that I believe that noise is partly responsible. Not just the tweets or the input from bad news sources or social media. I believe that noise itself is having an adverse effect on the brain. By the way, there's a movement in Japanese culture of silence. There are engineers now trying to design totally silent dishwashers that make no sound. There's a movement in Japanese culture towards this, of return to silence. So soundproofing walls, it's an interesting movement. So the next list, okay. So we had the things that we lost, that we were sorry are gone. There are also the things that are a list of things that are good riddance, and I'm glad they're gone. I don't think bell bottoms need to come back. I know that one's up. See, Daniel wasn't sure. He was like, ooh, I'm still kind of liking the bell bottoms. But hey, and I would love to see you in a pair, Daniel, the next time I come down. So let's work on that.
Too sexy. No, yeah, hand me downs. You can't say no. It's like,
as long as you have the platform shoes as well. But okay, I'll be looking. The AMC Pacer, how did that car get made? Whose idea was it? I had to go to and from gymnastics workouts every day in one of those with a coach. And I've never recovered from the smell or the appearance of that car. I hated it. As for my dad, when I presented this list to my dad, I didn't even finish describing it to him before he answered the question. He said, outhouses. Don't ever need to see another one in my life. And he said, in particular, in January and August, the two worst months for outhouses. And I had to think about it a little bit, but it came to me pretty quickly why those would be the two worst months for outhouses. But my dad, he said, yeah, that I don't need to even see one, to reminisce. It's not necessary. And I want to move on quickly so that we have time to talk here at the end. But this one I think is a very, very important list for us to keep as storytellers. And I use the word storytellers because I don't care if it's flash fiction, I don't care if it's novels, I don't care if it's poetry. The best in every field are the great storytellers. And I believe that a short poem is a great story if it's well written. I'm a firm believer in that. And so the childhood, high school friends, the relatives, the family members who always stood out in the crowd, the laughs. Did you ever have the friend in high school or something that when they were laughed, even if they were 2 hallways down and across, you knew where they were because I had an aunt who could laugh at a fireworks display on the 4th of July with 5,000 people, and I would know where she was in the crowd. It was earth shattering. It was a cross between a cough and a death cry, that her laugh. But the gates, the way people walked, there was always that guy that walked down the hallway in high school like this, and he wasn't even going anywhere. It was just the way he walked, it was just the way. So the gates, they are fingerprints. By the way, they say that the human laugh is as distinctive as the human fingerprint. So these were those people, for better or worse, who stood out. Okay. The guy who was probably one of the chief artistic influences on my life, I call him Uncle Dave, even though he's not my uncle. Went to college at a Baptist university in the late 60s, early 70s. And he was a white dude with a massive Godspell fro, and was notorious for going to class in an ankle-length black silk house coat that had a massive red dragon on the back and wearing nothing underneath it. And he went to the Baptist little college in Oklahoma because the drugs were better. And so that tells you a little. So character in my life, yeah. I mean, that guy was he was one of the huge characters in my life. And so, and then we're nearing the end of the list here, and I'm sorry, I'm on cruise now. I'm trying to get through because I would rather us talk a little bit, and I'm sorry we went a little long on this one, but I am a huge believer in ekphrastic writing, but there's a particular angle on it. I don't believe that ekphrastic writing needs to describe the picture or the painting. What fascinates me about ekphrastic writing, and I am in the process now of preserving some ancient, I'm going to exit screen sharing for a second because I want to show you a picture. I recently had a cousin present me. He had gone way down into the bowels of Ancestry.com. And he came up with a very bad, I believe it is a 10 type, a very bad reproduction of my great grandmother, Jane Wren, W-R-E-N, full-blood Cherokee from Southwest Oklahoma, who is holding my grandfather's brother. And man, did this photograph rock my world. They believe the photograph was from 1888. And so obviously, you know, that's a huge one. And excuse me while I mute the spam risk. But so that's the only calls I get. Nobody calls me anymore. It's just spam risk. That's all I get. And so, but can you see how, like, even though it's mine, you know, can you see how this coming to you in the mail, you know, in a folded piece of paper in an envelope, how that might just kind of shake my world? And I've already written about her. I've already written to her. I've already written her a poem, you know, just, oh my gosh, you know, that's, so I really believe in that. I believe that pictures can be launching pads for things that aren't even about the picture. But the thing about ekphrastic writing for me is an ekphrastic poem or writing or whatever it is, it should be the story of what's happening just outside the frame. What is it that we're not seeing in that picture? Do any of you have pictures from your past, maybe even of you, where the look on your face or this person's face or whoever it is, downcast, looking out of the frame, I do not want to be here, miserable. The things that those faces tell us. I have a stone face picture of my grandma Brown from Southwest Oklahoma from 1911. And someone explained to me that with photography at that time, that's how you had to stand and how you had to look, because of how long you had to stand there for the picture to be taken. And I never knew that. And I mean, it is behind, she's standing at the edge of a clapboard house, and in the rest of the field of vision behind her, an absolutely flat, treeless, weedless, grassless dirt plain as far as the eye could see. And that was actually the most gut-wrenching part of the photograph for me, was looking at that plain behind her as she stood there in the one dress that she had. That was it. And so what's happening outside that frame? Wow. That's and so this is the last one here. Toys, tools, and tidbits. The things, the odds and ends, and the detritus. What is the thing on your fireplace mantle that you cannot throw away. What are those crazy little things you cannot bring yourself to just get rid of? Why is that? There are stories. My mom has a little bell on her fireplace mantle. There's a story behind it. I still have my dad's shoe shine kit from when he shined the boots of soldiers in Fort Sill, Oklahoma in the 1940s. Check it out, folks. Oh my, that is a precious, I mean, for me, that is a precious, precious thing that I will never forget. So, so I want to just mention one other thing very quickly before I turn it over to you all. And that is another thing that happened for me that began to change the scope and nature of making the lists. And that was when I began to create a chronological timeline of each item on the lists. When was it that that happened? When was it that that taste was special to me? What was the time period for that? Okay, the girlfriend's perfume, that would have been around early 1970s. You know, and realizing that our experiences, memories, and things are highly impacted by the greater cultural things that were happening during that time period, okay, compounds our stories. You know, because of that iTunes playlist, I've had song lyrics make appearances in so many of my stories and poems now that, you know, because I realized that lyric was defining a time period. You know, all these things, you know, I know that Tom Wolfe tells us that we can't go back home again. I get it, but I'm a huge fan of revisiting anyway, Tom. I go back anyway. If I'm going to write about it, I go to the gas station and buy that damn Twix bar and I eat one. If it's going to make an appearance in my poem, I go get one and I eat it. You know, and I had a Twix problem for a while, but it was years ago and I'm okay now. I got through it. So for you all, what I want to say is, so what it is that because of this particular project, I'm now 20 plus years into a daily writing practice. And because of this project that I just told you about, I'm never without something to write about. There's always something. There's always something I could write about.